All right, guys. So let's get started talking about personality type. And there's a couple things I'm going to say before we get started. The first one is there is psychological research that says your personality type is something that will remain consistent pretty much throughout your whole life. And there's lots of theories about why this is. You might have heard of Sigmund Freud, who wrote about how personality type was defined by age 5 or 6 and then stays in place. And there's other people who've written about personality and where it comes from and how it gets established. I want to go ahead and throw in that in 2014, we know based on brain research and neuroscience that your personality type actually can change if you have some sort of trigger. So, for example, you might have heard of the story of a man named Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage was a railroad employee who lived and worked in Rutland, Vermont in, I'm going to go ahead and say the 1800s, but it might have been early 1900s. But Phineas Gage had an accident. He was working with some sort of spike that fell and hit a piece of dynamite and exploded, and the pike went through Phineas's face and came out the top of his brain, so kind of a type of thing. You can look him up. His name is Phineas with a PH. But Phineas Gage, before that accident, was just a nice person, nice neighborly kind of guy who was very pleasant to get along with and all those kinds of things. And after the accident, he completely changed. He started drinking, he started saying rude things to people in the streets, he started swearing, and nobody knew what happened to Phineas. But Phineas is kind of a classic story that we look at today for an instance where we know there was a traumatic injury to the brain and a particular part of the brain, and it changed his personality. So I'm just going to say that when you take your personality assessment, yes, it could stay the same way your whole life, barring any traumatic brain injury. So the second thing to know about your personality type is that you could have gotten 2 letters for each of the 4 spots. So I'm going to refer to my little whiteboard here and hold it up so that hopefully you can see it. My personality type is ENFJ. So you would have gotten something similar to this. And for the first one, you actually would get, your choices for the first personality type are I or E. And if you look at your report, you're going to see, actually it might be the other way around on your report, the E is listed first, but there'll be a little bar graph that looks like this. And it's going to shade in to which extent you were each of those things. So it's pretty rare that someone is ever all the way in E or all the way in I. You can think of it as more like a scale, like a number line, where if E is one end and I is on the other, you fall somewhere in between. So you would have gotten some of the personality reports look like this, and it shows you where you fall on a scale like that. The one that you guys have with the golden is going to look like this. So for me, my E is a little bit more than halfway, and my introvert is kind of close to the middle. And it should be that if you added these up, it would make a whole. So kind of like if it was 1/2 and 1/2, it would make one whole. But the reason for this is for you to kind of get the idea that this is not an exact science, and it's not black and white. There's some sort of gray area that you fall under. So let's keep talking about E versus I and give you some examples. So E stands for extrovert. And you can see that in your report, and I stands for introvert. And this scale of extrovert versus introvert is a measure or a representation of how you get your energy. And what that means is, what is it that you do? You can think of it in these terms. What is it that you do to recharge, to come back to center, to feel good and ready to go again? So if you imagine that it's the end of a long week at work, and you're exhausted. It's Friday afternoon and you're just pooped and you just need to chill out. An extrovert chilling out or relaxing, for them, unwinding is going to be going out with people, being around others. Maybe there's noise in the background, maybe there's something to do, but it's something that usually involves interaction with others. An introvert is going to be someone who either prefers to maybe be alone, or who prefers to be with just a smaller group of people, one or two or maybe three, and they usually prefer to keep things a little more low key. Maybe they're going to go home and order pizza, and the extrovert's going to go out for pizza, and that's going to be, it's a different feel, it's a different vibe. When you go home and order pizza, you can wear your jammies and unwind at home, and when you go out and order pizza, you are usually still wearing something, and maybe you even put on your most fabulous pair of jeans because you needed to feel awesome that day. But what happens with that E versus I scale is, and this is true for all the scales, you can start to think about what are the parts of your life where you're more of an extrovert versus an introvert. So look at your report and see what's shaded in for you. Which part is shaded more, or which bar has more shading, the extrovert or the introvert, and that would be the letter that you got, and start to think about the roles you play. You are a student. You are maybe a parent. You are definitely someone's child. You have friends. You have people that you work with. You've got all these different roles that you play in your life. And in some of those roles, you might be an extrovert who's an extrovert in 9 out of the 10 roles in your life. And then in one of them, you're more of an introvert. So an easy example to talk about is myself. So I'll refer to myself often. But I am an extrovert as a teacher. For example, this whole video thing, I love doing this. I think it's awesome to record videos for you guys to watch. Some of my colleagues absolutely can't stand the thought of doing a video. It's just not part of who they are, and they're not comfortable with that. Speaking in front of a group of people, got it, I'm good. Teaching, for me, that's my extrovert energy. I actually have been really tired this week because my kids have been sick, but when I get to campus and I get in front of class, my energy goes through the roof because that's what it does for me. Being an extrovert means I need to be around people and interact with people, and that gets me feeling better. I can literally be in a brain fog and feel exhausted and like I can't think clearly, but as soon as I'm around people, it just feels better. The fog goes away and I can function normally. So for someone who's an introvert, think about, sorry, I want to back up for a minute. I said the wrong thing. Okay, so I'm actually pretty close to the middle for extrovert, introvert. Teaching is where I have that extrovert tendency. There's other parts of my life that I feel more like an introvert, and I have to really pay attention to those areas to make sure they get what they need. So one of my favorite things to do in the world is go to a coffee shop with my laptop and write. I am a writer. I'm a talker, but I'm also a writer. And when I do that, I want to be by myself. I don't need to be with anyone. I like going to a coffee shop because there's enough people moving around me that I don't get bored, and I have something to watch. I have something to help me feel like I'm part of some sort of buzz or community, but it's a nice place for me to focus and be quiet and attentive to what I'm doing. So that's kind of a way that being an introvert kind of sticks up for me. But just start to think about in your life, what makes you feel really good. When you get to that place where your brain's kind of tired and foggy and you feel like you're not really sure where you're going to go, or you're feeling overwhelmed and there's just so much to do and I can't get it all done, what does it take to get you back to center? Is it being around people, or is it having some downtime where there's nothing you have to worry about? And that's going to be a sign for you. That's going to be the extrovert versus introvert, because it's where you get your energy, where you get what you need to take your next step, where you get what you need to get your clarity so that you can move forward. All right, I hope this makes sense. I'm going to move on to the next video now, and if you have any questions about any of these, certainly send me emails. Okay, see you in the next one.